This channel is what studying abroad dreams are made of. Do subscribe and hit the bell icon.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Like every week, we are back with some really interesting content all around overseas education. And this week, we're going to be talking to an expert instructor for GMAT, and you guessed it right. We are going to talk about taking the GMAT at home. Thank you so much, Stacey, for joining us today and talking to the students all about the test and some facts and myths that we're going to bust today about this test.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Dive in straight and ask you, the very basic things about this test, right? The basic logistics of it. What kind of technology do I need to have with me to give this test? And what should my ambience be like?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, you do need a computer of some type, a desktop or a laptop computer. You can't take the exam on a tablet. They do accept either Mac or Windows, so you can use either operating system, but some kind of computer. You will need a mouse or a trackpad on the computer. You can't use a writing tablet like a bamboo tablet or something like that, and a stylus when you're taking the exam. It's got to be a mouse or just a trackpad on your laptop. And and a webcam, of course, but that's pretty much it. The webcam can be integrated into your computer. I used a laptop, and so the webcam is right there on my laptop, but you can also have an external webcam that you're just plugging in.
Right. So basic setup, can students take the test on an Apple laptop as well?
I did, yeah. I'm on a Mac right now, and this is the computer that I used to take the test, so yes.
And no special installations of a Windows or anything of that sort?
Nope, it was super easy. It's different for the GRE. You can't take it on a regular Mac. You could run a virtual machine on your Mac and install Windows, but you can't just use your Mac. But on the GMAT, yes, you can just use your Mac.
That's right. And so tech we know now. What would you say about a Wi-Fi connection or the internet?
So they do recommend that you hardwire into your internet connection to take it. When I took it in a room that doesn't have my tech equipment, my internet equipment in it, and so I did use my Wi-Fi. I don't have anyone else here using it, and I didn't have any other devices using it, so I didn't have any issues. But certainly, if I were in a household with other people or had multiple devices using it and pulling bandwidth at the same time, I would probably want to make sure that I'm hardwired in.
Yeah, so I think to reiterate what you're saying, maybe use a LAN cable if you can.
If possible, yeah, just to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're sharing the internet with your family or your roommates, maybe request them to not use it for the next 3-4 hours so that you get the complete bandwidth.
Yeah, at least don't be streaming Netflix or something like that while I'm trying to take the test.
Not a good idea at all. We get an idea about the technology. What would you recommend should be the ambience?
Yes, so you do need to make sure that where you're sitting, you're not going to be interrupted. That first of all, nobody's going to walk into you in the room, that you've got a door that you can close and keep everybody else out. And you don't want them to be able to hear voices, basically, because you don't want them to think that someone else is in the room with you. So you wouldn't want to, for example, have your window open and then they're hearing voices float in from outside and they're wondering who else might be in the room with you. They have said that if, imagine that you're taking the exam and, a small child opens up the door and runs in or something like that, they're not going to suddenly cancel your exam if it's an obvious mistaken interruption like that and the person just turns around and leaves again. But if they hear sustained talking, they're going to ask you to show, is somebody else in the room? Or if someone comes in and just starts talking to you and doesn't leave immediately, then you risk having your exam canceled.
That's right. So preferably nobody in the room should be shut. What happens if I have books around me? Can I keep my phone with me?
Not within arm's length. So you may use your phone when you start at the process. One of the things you're doing is showing your ID, and you can use your webcam to show that, or you can also take pictures with your phone and send it in that way. But once you're done with that tech setup at the beginning and the security check, you need to take the phone and either place it like within sight but behind you so that they can see it and see that you're not touching it, or like physically take it and go move it across the room or out of the room or something like that. And same for books. We did have a report of someone being allowed to, they had their laptop set up on like a cookbook so that they could just lift the level of laptop, and that was okay. They showed that it was just a cookbook, and so that was fine. But you certainly not math books or textbooks or anything like that.
Yeah, for all you know, the GMAT book right underneath your laptop.
Yeah, yeah, that's not gonna work.
Absolutely, yeah. So nothing at arm's length, and I mean, naturally placed, you know, bookshelf behind you should be fine. I mean,
so especially if it's inside, like if like I've got this bookshelf, I didn't take it in this seat, but I've got this bookshelf behind me, but then you could see if I reached back and pulled a book off the bookshelf, right? So
yes.
what they don't want is for you to have something that's like that you can easily just pick up and look at without them being able to see it. So you show them at the beginning, like you have to take pictures of your desk from all directions, basically. So showing it this way, this way, this way, this way, so that they can see what's there. And just make sure that your desk is clean. You are allowed, by the way, to have a glass of water in a clear glass so that they can see that it's just a clear glass. So yeah, exactly. So definitely do that because you get thirsty while you're taking the exam.
But just water, no snacks allowed, am I right?
No snacks allowed during the exam. When you're on your 5-minute break, you can leave the room and you can get food and drink, but not during the exam.
Right. And just after that, I think a good question to ask would be, would I have to interact with the proctor while taking the test, and how do I do that?
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy. So when you start the exam and you're going through all of the technical checks, you're talking to a proctor while you're doing that, and they're explaining how things work. And if you do have any questions at that point, definitely ask. The proctor that I had was super nice and patient and answered all my questions. I was really nervous while I was getting ready to take the exam. As they set everything up for you, one of the things that pops up is a little window that contains, first of all, it contains a video of you looking back at yourself, which distracted me while I was taking the test. You can drag the window around, so you could just drag it so that the video part of you is off the screen. But the other two things that little window contains is a button to call a chat box up to call the proctor during the exam, and then a button to pull the whiteboard up that you're going to do your scratch work on as you take the exam. So you can click to call the proctor basically at any time. When I only used it once during the exam when I was about to go on break, and I would estimate it was probably 15 seconds or something before the proctor started chatting with me. Other people I've heard reporting, it might be a couple of minutes before the proctor comes back and talks to you. So just be aware there might be a little bit of delay there, but the same would be true in the regular testing center as well. There's usually only 1 or 2 proctors watching a room of 10, 15, 20 people. So they're going to people as they raise their hands. So you could wait there too.
That's right. I think another point that I would like to add is that once you do, want to interact with the proctor, and especially with regards to the break that you want to take, let them know that you want the entire break. Because we were speaking to one of the students, and he mentioned that he wanted to take the entire break, but since he came back and sat, back in his chair.
They started it up again. Okay.
But he just wanted to sit back and compose himself before he restarts.
Oh, that's good. That's a good tip. I didn't realize that happened. When I came back from my break, I had already used about extra 20 seconds into my section because I was a little bit late coming back from my break. That's good to know. Yeah,
so it's good to be clear and make the most out of the break that you get.
For sure. It's not a very long break.
It is not. And I would suggest that you grab a Snicker or an energy bar while you're at it. You really need that sugar rush.
I completely agree. I would have the food and drink that you want to have ready to go in another room so that you can walk out and just immediately start eating and drinking. This would be the same in a testing center. You'd have it ready to go in your locker so that as soon as you come out of the room, you can grab your food. So,
absolutely. Now, the main question, the elephant in the room is, the whiteboard. What do
Yes.
you suggest about that? What are your thoughts on that?
There is definitely a learning curve in getting ready to or getting used to using the whiteboard. And I think there's really two different groups of people that we need to talk to or to talk about here. There's people who are ready to go or were already ready to go when the exams all got interrupted. And so they're done or almost done with their studies, but they haven't been practicing with this whiteboard. It's going to be harder for that group because they're going to have to take some extra time to go back now and get used to the whiteboard, even though they were already pretty much ready to go. The other group of people who are earlier in their studies just incorporate this into your studies the way you would incorporate anything in your studies that you learned, like when they just announced they were going to have the integrated reasoning section on the exam, people started studying for it, and by the time they took the exam, they were fine. So for those folks, it's less of an issue as long as you're just incorporating it regularly into your studies and doing practice problems that way, and by the time you get to the test, you'll know how to use it and you'll be fine. For people who are in that first group, I only had about 3 days to practice with the tool before I took the official exam. It was, I think I ended up doing maybe around 6 hours of practice with it. It was okay, but I could have used more time. It wasn't quite enough time to really get used to it. So I've been telling my students who are in that position, plan to take at least a week. And for a lot of people, it's probably going to be closer to 2 weeks of doing practice every day of all of the different kinds of question types that you're going to see, and take at least one practice test fully in the format that you're going to have to take the real test in. I did not do that. When I did take so I took an MBA.com practice test, one of their free practice tests. But what I did was I took the quant section sitting at my desk where I was going to take the real test. And then I was like, oh, this is a wooden chair. It's uncomfortable. And I don't like sitting here. And I went and I sat on my couch for the rest of the test. And I
Right.
shouldn't have done that because I wasn't mimicking the test conditions. And so when I went 2 days later, when I went to take the real test, same thing, I started getting uncomfortable in the chair, but I couldn't do anything about it because I had to stay there since it was now the real test. And so I hadn't planned on things like there's no break now between the quant and verbal sections. And so you're staring at your computer screen for a little bit over 2 hours, like and you're not even getting the little break of doing this to work on your scratch paper. You're just physically, you're locked in this direction the entire time. And you want to make sure that you're building in things like just kind of doing this every, 5 minutes or every few questions or something like that, so that you're not getting too tense as you're taking the exam. And that's what happened to me during the verbal section. I started to get so tense in my neck and my shoulders that it hurt, and it was actually distracting me from taking the exam. And it affected my performance in the verbal section. So make sure that as always, make sure that you're practicing under the testing conditions that you're expecting to see when you take the real exam, whether that's online or in the testing center, so that you make sure that you're really getting used to the full environment that you're going to face on test day.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant suggestion, right? Keeping in mind the ergonomics of taking your test, making sure you're practicing for those, 2 hours, 4 hours, sitting on the desk where you will be sitting for the test and going through the whole process. And with regards to the whiteboard, what would you suggest, for practicing? Which tools, which websites would you recommend for the students to practice and learn from?
Yeah. So we've actually recreated the whiteboard. Interestingly, what they use for the whiteboard is an open source software, and they released a couple of screenshots of it before they even released the exam. And so our tech team was able to go find the same open source software that this is built on, and they recreated it exactly. So we've made it available to everybody for free. You don't have to be one of our students to use it. If you just sign up for a free account, you'll find it in the account, basically. So grab that. It's in a web page. You can resize the web page to whatever size you want, which is what you're going to want to do on the test, right, to fit on the screen with whatever work you're doing, whatever problems you're doing on the screen. GMAC has released their own version of the whiteboard, but it's embedded into a web page, so you can't easily resize it the way that you can on the real test. So go and grab that, and then you're going to want to do problems that are on your screen as well, right? So don't be using if you have the physical OG, don't use that because you want to mimic, again, the test conditions. So if you have the physical OG, it comes with access to the same questions that are in the book on a website. And the problems are just delivered in like mixed random problem sets. So you can do that. You can also take official practice tests or practice tests from a company, if you've bought those, or basically whatever materials you have, you want to try to do it on the screen. You're going to place the problem on the screen, the whiteboard on the screen, and just go ahead and do it the way that you would need to do it on the real test. And you'll find as you practice with the whiteboard, a lot of things you're going to do exactly the same way that you would do on scratch paper, but there are certain differences because of it's just a different medium of working. So some of those differences are things that are going to be annoying and that you're like, oh, it's hard to write all of this out, or it's hard to draw this geometry diagram or whatever. And so you're going to have to find tweaks or slight differences in terms of how you do that so that you aren't writing as much. Excuse me. But I actually did find at times that there were a couple of advantages. I was not expecting this, but there are actually a couple of advantages to the whiteboard. And the biggest advantage to me was that you no longer have to be doing this all the time.
Yes.
The problem and your scratch work are next to each other. So back before the GMAT went computer, when it was still just given on paper, you were working on the problem right next to where you saw the problem written. And when it first went to computer and people had to start looking down to do their scratch work, everyone was like, oh my God, this is crazy. How can you do a test where you can't see, you can't write right next to what you're trying to work on? Well, we have that back again with the whiteboard.
Yes.
So when there's a crazy equation or whatever, I don't have to copy down the whole equation first before I can start working. I can just work straight from, because my scratch work is right below this equation, right? So that makes it easier. And then the other thing I found during the verbal section that was easier was I find it easier to type than to write. I type faster than I write. So when I was taking notes for reading comprehension or for critical reasoning, it was actually easier and faster to do that by typing than by having to write it on my scratch paper.
Absolutely. I think some brilliant points made there. I feel too, right? When you have the equation in front of you and you just need to refer back to the question which is on screen adjacent to your working sheet, you save time, A, because you're not, looking up and down. B, the other reason you're going to save time is you're literally just, having to write the bare minimum. You're having to, create the bare minimum on the screen on your working sheet because you can see everything.
Yeah, you don't have to recopy everything on your scratch paper.
Exactly. So there's lesser noise on the whiteboard and you can erase and do away with whatever you don't want immediately. So it is in fact a benefit. But another question I would love to ask is that are there any tutorials? Is there any kind of mentorship on, understanding the, how to get nifty with the tool? Like if I want to get a quick crash course on just being able to use it.
Yeah, so we've got some videos on our YouTube channel. We set up a little, I forget what it's called, sub-channel or group or whatever, that's got the videos around all the online whiteboard stuff. So there's one that's just like a Online Whiteboard 101 that's here's what the tools are and how to use them. And then we actually recently, I think at the end of last week or maybe this week, early this week, we released a little, two videos, one for quantum, one for verbal, where there's multiple teachers, me and then some of my colleagues, where you see us actually solving problems. So we put the problem in the online whiteboard up on the screen and you see us solving how we choose to use the whiteboard. We explain how we're solving it as we go. And then talk a little bit after we've finished solving the problem, just about what are the little tips or tricks or things that we want to mention for this particular problem about how best to solve it using the online whiteboard. So check those out, definitely. I think they might have, I'll go check when we're done talking, but I think they might have just gone up in the last couple of days.
Sure. You know what? We're going to get those links from you and we'll add them in the description over here. And students are free to check them out, once they want to start practicing. This brings me to another really important question, and that is there any difference in the quality of questions, in the difficulty level?
I noticed no difference. To me, it felt the same way as always when I go in and take the exam. There was no discernible difference.
So no leniency because it's a little more difficult for students.
No, the exam felt the same as it always feels. I wouldn't expect them to change anything with this, right? The exam is still the exam. They want you, and actually we want that too, because we want the schools to know that this is just as hard as it is all the time, and to take these scores in the same way that they take scores from somebody who's taken in the testing center. So,
right.
Yeah,
So
it felt the same to me.
Right. So does that also imply that the scores would hold as much value as a traditional test would, or
I
the
think so.
university would expect me to take it again?
I think it's highly unlikely that schools will expect people to take it again in the testing center. If they do, I would be kind of looking side-eye at that school. The world is in a global pandemic. You know, everyone's doing their best to get through everything that we need to get through in order to still keep our lives and keep the world running. And the sense that, like, for all of the contexts that I have had within schools, they just want people to be able to take the exam. They know everybody's doing their best. It's not a big deal that there's no essay score because the essay section is the least important section. This is keeping the process rolling, and that's what the schools want. So the schools are happy to have this be available for people.
So the essay section is no more applicable for the GMAT at home.
For the yes, when you take it online, you don't do the essay. If you do go back into a testing center and take it, you will be writing the essay. FYI.
So pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Yeah. So you don't have to do the essay if you take it online at home. You do though, like, have that thing where you have to do quant and verbal right together without getting a break. In the testing center, you'd still have a break between quant and verbal. So, you have to decide. It's also cheaper to take it at home than it is to take it in a testing center. So you got to decide for yourself what you think is the best way.
Yes.
But I wouldn't worry about the schools discounting having taken it at home or anything like that. I don't think the schools are going to care at all.
Yeah, that's I think important, because I don't think anyone's ready to retake the test just because it was
just
online.
For that reason. Yeah, no.
Yes. So if I may ask, how much did you score in your test?
So the interesting thing, let's compare my scores to the prior time that I took it in a testing center, which was in 2017. So my overall score did drop. I had a 770 when I took it in 2017. I did drop to a 740 when I took it online. Okay. Which sounds like a really big drop, but here's what happened. So my quant score actually went up by 1 point. In 2017, I had a 48. In the one that I just took, I had a 49. So my quant score went up by 1 point. So clearly the whiteboard did not impact, like the whiteboard was fine. It was not a problem. My IR score ditto went from a 7 in 2017 to an 8 in the exam that I just took last month. So my IR score went up 1 point as well. What happened was that my verbal score dropped. And my verbal score dropped not because of the whiteboard, because you don't really use the whiteboard very much for the verbal section. It dropped because of what I was describing earlier, where I didn't actually get ready for the test and take the full test in that chair and make sure that I was comfortable and figure out how to not have not have neck strain. And I also didn't figure out, I knew that there wasn't a break between quant and verbal, but I didn't think about, like, okay, so what do I want to do about that to give myself a little break, a little mental break, even though I have to sit in the chair. I actually finished the quant section like maybe 2 minutes early, and I just clicked and kept going. I could have just let the time run out and just sit there and close my eyes and relax. And on the verbal section, I always finish the verbal section a little early, so I knew I was going to have time with it. I could have just taken the first 2 minutes of the verbal section also and created like a 4 or 5 minute break for myself. Still sitting in my chair, but at least give myself that mental break and roll my neck around and just loosen up a little bit. And I didn't. I was so nervous about the exam, and I hadn't thought about it in advance. And when you're nervous and you don't have a plan, you're just going to like keep plowing ahead. So you've got to have the plan, because you are going to be nervous. We're all nervous when we take these exams. So you've got to have that plan and know what you want to do and how it's going to work best for you, so that you can just follow your plan when you're nervous and you don't have to think about it. So learn that from me. Make sure that you're actually practicing the whole thing in advance and thinking about how do I want to maximize, however you take it, whether it's in the testing center or whether it's at home, but maximize my ability to work my best in the 3-ish hours that I'm taking this exam.
I think those are some really interesting points for students to, realize that you can keep practicing and, you can keep working on the content of the, test, but you need to understand that there's a lot more of emotional capacity, ergonomics, and, feeling fatigued or nervous that will come into the picture, and that might actually play up on you. So you've got to prepare yourself on those lines as well.
Yeah, a lot of people forget about that stuff or think it won't really matter that much, and it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, simple things like getting those 2 minutes, if you finish the test and just, sit back, relax, and get that composure back so that
Hmm.
you regain that energy to go ahead and, continue with the verbal section.
Yeah, and I would say literally plan to do that. So whichever section is your stronger section, or maybe you do this in both sections, I think it's literally worth, even at the end, if I'm like, oh, I still have one question to go and 2 minutes to go in the quant section, I might still just guess on that question anyway, because I value that 2 minutes of getting the mental break more than I would value a single question at the end of the test. And ditto at the beginning of the test. I would take that 2 minutes and then just start working, knowing if that means I run out of time at the end and I have to guess on the very last question. Again, that mental break between the sections is worth it so that I can recharge and really do my best for the questions that I am answering.
Absolutely brilliant. So really, it's a trade-off between that one question versus getting those 2 minutes and getting the entire next section.
Right, getting your brain, charged up again, basically, for the entire
Yeah,
section. Yeah.
absolutely. Your overall suggestion about giving the test. Any magic words for the students?
I was speaking with someone else who said, okay, so now that you've done it, would you do it again? Would you take it again? That way, like, what if we had the choice going forward to take it at home versus going into a testing center, and what would you do? And now that I've done it and I've seen it and I've gotten more comfortable with the online whiteboard, I think if we had the choice in future, I would probably actually choose to take it at home versus going into a testing center. It's so much more convenient than having to go across town and then wait and then, the whole thing to take it at a testing center. And it's really just a matter of getting comfortable with what you're expecting to happen. You can get comfortable with it. You just need to practice it and get used to it. It's just, we have to get used to taking it in the testing center too. And it's the same thing. You practice and you get used to it. So the weird thing at first about taking it online is that it's new, it's different. It's not something we've done before, but it's something that you can get used to, just like you get used to anything else with enough practice and with appropriate practice. I'm actually taking, so the organization that makes the GMAT, they also make another exam called the Executive Assessment. It's typically used for executive MBA programs, and I'm taking it this evening, the official one this evening. So I'm actually looking forward to it in a weird way. When I took the GMAT, I was so nervous, but now, like, I know what to expect. I know how the platform's going to work. I know how the online whiteboard is going to work. I feel prepared this time. Like, it's going to be fine.
Brilliant. I think we've learned quite a few interesting things about the test. Lots of myths busted. We have a lot of factual information, and of course, great advice on keeping composure and preparing and practicing not just the questions, but even your ambience. So many important things that we generally miss out, but they actually end up playing upon us when we take the test. Thank you so much, Stacey, for all these, words of advice. Guys, if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to us in the comment section. We're going to leave in all the links that we've referred to through this, dialogue in the description, so you can always check them out as well. You can check us out on our social media handles. We're iSchoolConnect everywhere. And I think that's pretty much it from us. Thank you once again, Stacey.
My pleasure, and good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye, guys. Take care.